Hello everyone. I'm trying a new format for us for giving the instructions around our development opportunity. I figured we could use something a little bit more modern than a Word document with photos attached. So for this video, we're going to be going over what we did last week in building a UI, and we're also going to talk about some of the little tips and tricks that I showed you last week that you can utilize during your further development with XR and Unity. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create this UI canvas. So what we want to do is we want to go up here and we're going to change our perspective from 3D to 2D by pressing this toggle here. So now we're in the 2D view. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come into this hierarchy window and we're going to right click. We're going to scroll down to UI and we're going to put a canvas down. Now, we could also put down a text or an image or any of these other game objects, and it would create a canvas for us. But for this purpose, we're going to create the canvas from the start. So now we have our canvas, and you'll notice right here I already have this entire thing done. So instead of renaming this to UI, I'm going to rename this to menus. So I'm going to click in the box in the inspector and type menus and then hit enter. So what I'm looking at here is a bottom corner of our entire UI panel. I don't want to be looking at just the bottom corner. I want to be able to see the entire thing. So I'm going to click on menus in the hierarchy again, make sure that it's highlighted. And I know that something is selected in the hierarchy when I see its properties here in the inspector. Then I'm going to place my mouse cursor in the window of the scene window, and I'm going to press the F key. And that's going to bring that entire object into view. So remember, if you're trying to find something, click it in the hierarchy window and then hit F, and that'll focus it. So now that we have the menus canvas already created, we're going to now create a child of it. So to create a child, we're going to right click again on menus. We're going to go down to UI and we're going to hit text. Now here we see that we have a text box. Now this text box is going to become our menu. This is what's going to actually tell people how to interact with our various objects in the game world or in the AR scene. So for now, because I don't have any real instructions or any interactions built in, I'm just going to write in some placeholder text over here into the text component of the text game object. So this is some placeholder text, and I'm going to hit enter. So now I should have two lines of text here, one that is a full line of text and a blank line of text. And just to make sure that if this menu gets to be a lot bigger and I have a lot of interactions, that it actually shows up in that space, I want the horizontal overflow to wrap, not overflow. I want it to wrap so that it'll come down to this bottom line. And I want vertical overflow, instead of truncating, I want that to overflow. This way I can see that last little bit of text there, and I know I have to resize my box. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to again right click on menus. We're going to go down to UI. I'm going to create an image. Now this image over here is actually going to be the background for this text. I did this in reverse order specifically to show you something, that we can reorder objects in the hierarchy by clicking and dragging them. So I'm going to reorder image above text by clicking it and dragging it up above text. So now, as you can see, not only has image appeared above text in the hierarchy, but here in the scene view, we can see that before this image was above this text when it was back down here. Now we've placed it above that text, and so it appears behind it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on text and I'm going to drag it onto the image game object. This makes text a child of image. So now if I collapse this, you'll only see image. This just makes it easier to move them around. So right now, this is a little bit zoomed out for me. So I'm on a mouse right now, so I'm actually just going to scroll in so that I can get a little bit better view of what I'm doing. Next, I'm going to select image, and I can resize it up here using the rect transform. If I wanted to, I could change the width and height of this box right now to, I don't know, 50 and 120, which is ridiculous. I could also then rotate it and pivot it. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm not going to mess with these values directly. I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to scale it out using my click and drag. So I can click and drag any of these corners or edges and it'll readjust it as need be. Now, you saw that when I moved it, it moved off the center position. We can see this here. We have position X is now minus 57.21, position Y has changed. So if I want to reset it, I could try to click on this little blue circle here and drag it back to get it to that center position, and it'll let me know I'm at center or close to center when it shows me those blue lines. Another way I can do it is I can go into the inspector over here, go to the rect transform, and I can just click in each one of these boxes and I can set it to 0 and hit enter. Similarly, these values are kind of crazy. So I'm going to make these values a little bit more standard really fast of 165, hit enter, and then this is 53, so I'll actually leave that at 53 just to make it a bit easier. So now we have our box that contains our image and our placeholder text for our menu. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on menus. I'm going to go down to UI and I'm going to make a button. This is the first of 2 buttons we're going to make. And the first thing I'm going to do with this button is I'm actually going to change the name of the button just so that I can know which one is which. So I'm going to call this button help. The reason I'm calling this help is because this is going to become our help button. So when the user is interacting with our AR experience and they want to get some information on how to use the experience, they'll click the help button. Now, in here, we see there's a lot of things that we can do with the color and the fade and all this other stuff, and I'll leave that to you to play around with. The only thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to expand the help button so I can get access to its text child. I'm going to go into the text component of the text child, and I'm going to change that text to the word help. And that's it. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to resize it because we don't want this button to be giant and in the middle of the screen all the time. So I'm going to make it smaller. And then I'm going to actually click and drag using that little blue circle to put it up in the left-hand corner. So we can play around with the sizing of it later, but that's fine for now. The other button I'm going to make is I'm going to make the exit out button. So I'm going to make one more button, and I'm going to change the name of it to a big X. Now I'm going to change the color. So there's 2 ways you can change the color with a button. If you change the color on the button component, you'll actually see that there's various options, and these will change based on the state of the button. You can also just set it to have a base color from the image that you have on the button. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the color component of the image. We're going to do that by simply clicking on this white box, and this is an exit out button, so a red works. Maybe a light red, that's fine for me. That works. And I'm also going to change the UI image because I want the button to be a little bit visually different than the help button. So to change that source image, I'm going to click on this area that says UI Sprite, and I'm actually going to click this little target right next to it. So once I click this little target right next to it, we'll see that I get this menu. This allows me to choose from any one of the various icons or sprites that I have. A sprite is just a 2D image that I have that I can use to change the background of this button. So for this, I'm going to choose knob. because that's going to make it into a circle, so it'll look a little bit different than our help button. Once I have it selected, I'm just going to exit out because you notice that it has already changed the shape. So it hasn't given me a nice circle because we have a rectangle for the button. So I'm going to click and drag the edge and bring it in. So now I have a nice circle here, but it still says button. So to change that, we're going to go into the text child of the X button, and we're going to change the text in the text component to a capital X. Now, if we want this capital X to be a little bit visually different, we can also go in and change the font style or size or spacing. So for this, I'm actually going to change it to bold, just to make it a little bit easier to see. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click that, again, little blue circle in the center, and I'm going to drag it up into the right. Oh, there we go. So now we have a help button, we have a exit out button, and we have a menu. So we can rename these a little bit nicer to menu for our image, because that's what it is. And now we have help and X. And this is our basic UI setup. You'll notice I have basically the same thing here. I've named it a little bit differently. And you can play around with your names as you want. The other thing is we're going to set it so that we can see the UI as the user would see it normally. To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take the help button and we're going to drag that up to the top underneath menus. And then I'm going to take menu and X, and I'm going to go over here to this inspector window, and I'm going to uncheck that checkbox. So what you'll see is when I uncheck that checkbox, it doesn't show up. So this is what our user would see from our UI. This UI will persist over everything we do in the scene. So at any point in time, the user will be able to see this little help, and if they tap the help in the top corner, we'll write some scripts later that'll pull up these other two pieces. That's the basics of the UI menu.